630 CHED presents The Announcers. Opinion, personality, passion. The Announcers on 630 CHED, Edmonton's breaking news and conversation station.
This is The Announcers. I'm Ryan Jespersen, host of The Ryan Jespersen Show here on 630 CHED, weekday mornings from 9 to noon. Why are the two of you already laughing?
Because we're just thinking that maybe we need to change the name of your show. It's the Ryan Jespersen Show.
It's working.
I know, it's working great.
It leaves no question about who's hosting. Jalen Nye, Andrew Grose, co-host of the Afternoon News with Jalen Nye and Andrew Grose. Right here on 630 CHED, weekday afternoons from 2 to 6. It's good to see you both.
Nice to see you.
One of the things about doing talk radio is we sometimes wildly swerve from the comical and the silly to the absolutely serious. And it was not just talk radio hosts that did that this week. It was Albertans, Canadians, people around the world that were paying attention to the story, originally the murder of Terry Blanchette, a 27-year-old father of one, and an Amber Alert issued for his daughter, Hailey Dunbar-Blanchette, 2 years of age. It was about 32 hours after that Amber Alert was issued that it was canceled, that it was called off for tragic reasons, the discovery of little Hailey's body. And so the country hurts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, when you're on air on a day like that and the days that follow, and I think that all of us felt the same way. It was just how very much people were touched by this story and horrified and angry and sad. And to see that outpouring is really something else.
You know, I spent the better part of that day driving down to Banff to do a comedy show, and I had it tuned to 630 CHED the whole time. So I saw that event unfold not as an announcer but as a listener. And honestly, I was timing gas stops, phone calls, everything to get the news break and see if anything had developed. And just the longer that Amber Alert went on, the less optimistic I became about the outcome. And sadly, it wasn't good.
I had a very bad feeling right from the get-go. And I don't know if that's because I've watched too many, crime scene investigation stories, or maybe I was trying to play an armchair detective, but just I had a really bad gut feeling from the get-go, and I was hoping against hope that wasn't going to be the case, but unfortunately didn't necessarily surprise me that much when they announced it at 10 o'clock the following evening.
Police arresting, interrogating, and subsequently laying charges against 22-year-old Derek Soretsky, who was known to Hailey's mother, Cheyenne Dunbar, a resident of Edmonton. Also, it sounds like known to Terry Blanchette, Hailey's father, Mr. Soretsky. And that's another thing, by the way. Mm-hmm. Our listeners implored me to stop calling him Mr. Soretsky. Mm-hmm. Several listeners called in, and I think trying to, during our open line time, maintain some decorum, kept saying this gentleman deserves a fair trial. And then there was the outcry from those saying, don't you dare call him Mr. Don't you dare call him gentleman. We have about 100 questions we could ask as we muse over these next 20 minutes or so. One of them that I think is worth talking about is the natural inclination, and I say natural strategically and on purpose, as a member of society to automatically get very angry when a child is harmed, let alone killed.
Yes, because I think in any great society we protect our children. And I think we believe that we live in a great society. And I think there's a frustration that we weren't able to protect this child. And I know, I don't know why it's, because there's two people who have lost their lives here. But the focus, and not rightly or wrongly so, is on the child. Because it just seems so tragic, because there's obviously never a reason for a 2-year-old to lose their life. Mm-hmm. Maybe down the road we hear some story and we have some explanation for why one adult, angrily takes another adult's life. But what we just know right now, without any more details, there's never going to be a legitimate reason that will pacify us for why a child lost its life.
And I think a lot of us end up kind of going in our head, wondering, going to that very, very dark spot, wondering how it was that she lost her life, and trying to even imagine the sheer horror that was going through a 2-year-old's little brain. And I say little brain, I mean, just, I'm not insulting, but as a little girl, as a 2-year-old who trusts mommy and daddy, her grandparents, who would just probably be trusting and thinking, okay, you're here, you're going to care for me, but then for this to happen, I think that is absolutely horrific for 99.9% of us.
Now, for reasons that are understandable, police remaining tight-lipped here. They have an investigation to protect. They need to protect the integrity of the evidence that they'll be submitting to the prosecutor, who will be pursuing these charges, 2 charges of first-degree murder, 1 charge of offering an indignity to a body. Derek Soretsky faces those, and he'll appear in Lethbridge Court on September 23rd. The 2 first-degree murder charges are very significant. If it were to be 1 first-degree, 1 second-degree, one might conclude, one might assume that the accused showed up to the house with the intention, hence the first-degree charge, of killing the father, discovered the daughter there, decided to, for whatever reason, in whichever context, to also take the life of that girl. That would justify a second-degree murder charge. 2 charges of murder in the first degree imply that police believe they have enough evidence to prosecute this man for willfully committing homicides, predetermined plans in place for both of the victims.
Well, I had looked up first-degree murder as well and did a little bit of research on that. And first-degree murder can also be laid if something happens during a kidnapping or a forcible confinement as well. But a lot of us, the intent. When we think about the Lickness case last year,
Alvin and Kathy, Nathan O'Brien, their grandson,
right? So the accused in that case was 2 counts of first degree and 1 count of second degree, which made us assume exactly what you had suggested, Ryan, that this person went in, deliberately killed the Licknesses and took the little boy. Right, and it wasn't premeditated, or it wasn't planned. I was rather surprised when I heard the 2 first-degree murder charges in this case.
Now, the indignity to a human body, that could be just disposing of it. That could be. It
could be. And this is something that we'll acknowledge is uncomfortable to talk about.
Yes.
We want to acknowledge this is a beautiful 2-year-old girl, little Hailey, that passed away, and we're talking about her life and her legacy, of course. But yes, it could be either that the body was simply transported, or it could be in more horrific circumstances that the remains were interfered with.
Mm-hmm. And there again, there's no happy part to this story, but there's some part of you that once you accept the horrific part of the story, you hope that charge was simply about moving the child's body and nothing more.
Yeah, and Andrew, I'd also you've led into something here, which I think is also an important point to make. We, at least with my show, when we went on the air on Wednesday morning after the announcement Tuesday night that the Amber Alert had been canceled, that Hailey's body had been found, and then we had a source indicate to us, a reliable one, that charges were pending and would be announced. We decided to blow out our schedule for that morning's show. Who cares about other stories? Who wants to hear about things like supply management? Who wants to hear what the leaders are saying on the campaign trail? Not me. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to be joking around with people about trivial subjects. But one of the very first people to be in touch with the show was the mother of 2 police officers, who said through all of this, and she certainly did not take the attention away from the grieving families, but she said through all of this, let's not forget the RCMP officers who were investigating this, who were looking for Hailey, who ultimately discovered her body, who had to photograph the scene. Let's not forget about the coroner who had to transport her body. Let's not forget about those that will be conducting the autopsy. This is the type of crime, the ripple effect of which will be felt literally across the country.
It's huge.
So how do we address something like this? It's maybe the wrong time to talk about capital murder, capital punishment, the death penalty at a time where emotions are high, but people can't help themselves.
Yeah. Immediate calls, right? Immediate calls on your show, on our show, that, let's bring back, or, death penalty, that sort of thing. It's, we hear it every time something like this happens.
And it's almost impossible to get it right. It's almost impossible to get the conversation right. I tried when we did it on our show, and I'd listened to your whole show, and I knew how angry people were, and people were grieving, and I knew that emotions were running high. Of course they're going to be running high. And I threw it out there that, this is tragic, and it's good to grieve, and it's natural to grieve, and it's natural to be angry. But you know what? Why don't we do something for another child today? Like, why don't we donate some money to something, help a child with help a group that helps children that don't have a good breakfast, or do something for a child that's in our neighborhood right now that we can help right now, because it's okay to grieve about this, but it's too late to do anything about that. But it's not too late to do something about this. And I got
You got
dumped
lambasted
on.
for
Yeah,
that.
I was comparing a murdered child to a breakfast, and that's not what I was doing at all. People are angry, and I guess they're angry at me too for saying that.
It sounds to me like you're talking about giving people an outlet.
Exactly. That's
an
what I
outlet
was
for
saying.
grief. When people say, "What can I do?" and the answer to provide is not, "You can't do anything."
Right. And
you
that's
can do something to express your caring element, your nature for fellow humans.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the frustration in a situation like this. On Monday, when I was driving to Banff, I went off-road into Canmore. I went into Banff because I thought maybe I'll spot that van. Like maybe, because I'm in the area. And I didn't. And it's frustrating that you can't do anything to help. And then you hear the child's gone. And I think that's what we all feel, is that, well, there's nothing we can do now. There's nothing we can do. And I was just trying to offer, well, here's something you can do, not for this child, but for some other child. But I guess I should have known. People are angry. And, while they're looking for something, to do to help, and they can't, they're also looking for somebody to vent their anger at. So, okay, I'll be that for a while.
But Andrew, not everybody's angry. I mean, some people are angry. Some people are devastated. Some people are heartbroken. Some people probably feel helpless. Some people, for someone that's been, fighting for a certain something, whether it's legislation on this or that, then some people will take more of a legal approach to this. Some people will everyone grieves in their own way. Everyone responds in their own way. I mean, there was a prominent magazine writer from Maclean's based out of Edmonton who took the opportunity to try out his new punchlines on Twitter. I was absolutely disgusted at that. But people respond in different ways. Now, we have to acknowledge here, we don't know the truth about the relationship between the accused, Derek Saretsky, and Terry Blanchette, the now deceased father of Hailey. We don't know complete legitimate details about the relationship between Derek Saretsky, the accused, and Cheyenne Dunbar, the mother. Obviously, they were all known to each other. We're hearing different accounts from different people. But the reason I bring that up is when we say we couldn't protect Hailey, is that a fair thing to say? There was no, as far as we know, emergency protection order in place. As far as we know, Derek Saretsky had no restraining order in place with regards to Terry Blanchette's residence. We don't know there were charges pending with a break and enter. Mr. Saretsky, we don't know if that involved Terry Blanchette or not. We have no reason to believe that it did. So it's not as though, had this man been declared a dangerous offender based on a previous aggravated assault conviction, this may not have happened. It doesn't sound like at this point that's the case.
It just happened. It happened, and there was, and I think that's one of the things I think all of us are looking for. What could we have done to make sure this didn't happen?
Right, moving ahead, what can we change?
But there was nothing that we could have done by all accounts to have saved little Hailey and Terry Blanchette, right? And that gets a lot of people upset. So now you start looking, okay, well then how do we protect other children? What do we do now? And that's where I think we saw, and the other thing is, and how do we punish people who hurt these children and who hurt our vulnerable? And that's where I think we saw this conversation jump ahead to with capital punishment.
Yeah,
right?
And I heard it on your show, Ryan. I heard people saying, "Oh, what's going to hapen is this guy's going to get convicted and he's going to get paroled, or he's going to, be on our tax dollar,
or he's going to be in solitary confinement." And everyone's saying, "Well, just throw him into the general population. Let them take care of him."
And some of that is the frustration over losing a child, right? Obviously, the other is the frustration over our legal system, and I hesitate to. It's hard to be on radio on a day like that, and much harder for other people to do other things. Much harder. It's harder for us to be on radio and talk about that, and try and control the conversation, because that's where the conversation goes.
Because you can't allow your broadcast to incite violence.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
You have a responsibility to stop that from happening.
Right.
At the same time, 630 CHED proudly provides a platform for free expression.
Yes.
So how do you reconcile the two?
It's hard. It's difficult because, and oftentimes you agree with some of the sentiments of a caller, but as you just said, you can't use the station to incite anger.
Go get them, kids.
Right.
No,
we had a caller by the name of Catherine, and I remember specifically, and I think I'll probably remember her call for a while, because she wanted us to take as a matter of fact, that may have been unfair. Let me describe it unfairly. You can draw your own conclusions. To cut to the chase, to essentially get to the heart of her message, let's not just feel sorry for the two victims here. Let's feel sorry for the accused. Let's feel sorry for the accused families. Catherine took the position that, quote, every life is precious, end quote. She suggested that there must have been factors in Derek Saretsky's upbringing that led him to commit these horrific crimes, and she was mortified to hear people suggest that Derek Saretsky should be subject to either capital punishment or prison justice. Is every life precious?
Yeah, of course, but timing's everything.
Why, of course?
Well, because all life is precious.
Is it?
I think so, but I don't think it's appropriate to speak of the accused on the day that we're still, on the days, in fact, that we're still mourning the victims. That the timing of that would incite anger.
CHED Nation piled on
Catherine. I'm sure they did. I understand the sentiment behind it, but again, maybe 5 years ago before I was on radio, I'd have piled on her too. I understand the sentiment because these are the ways these things unfold every time when there's a story like this. But that's not the day to express those thoughts.
Should child killers or child sex molesters be in the prison's general population, or should there be protective custody as there currently is?
Well, your question is, should we allow inmates to
murder
murderers, child molesters?
That's the question. We can't. We're a civilized society.
Yeah.
We know that we can't, and you two know right now, and if people are listening to this on the radio, we should point out that you can also watch these on the 630 CHED YouTube channel. Those watching will know that you both have smiles on your face because you want to say exactly what I want to say, but we know we can't say that we'd like to let the inmates sort it out.
Take care of business, right? Or at least make them know very clearly that they know what happened.
Because you know that there's a code in prison. And you know that no matter what insult we on the outside of prison walls think is the most strong, there's nothing worse than being called a goof in prison. Mm-hmm. When you call someone a goof, you better get ready to go because you're going to fight. And I can tell you that there were some inmates or some former inmates that wrote into the show on that morning saying that goof needs to die. Now, Derek Saretsky has not yet been tried, let alone convicted.
That's where I was going to get to next,
Can this man even possibly have a fair trial?
I wouldn't want to be on that jury. You wouldn't want to be on that jury? No.
I would.
Well, that's why you wouldn't be on it, though.
That's why you wouldn't be on it.
They're going to have to find people that have never heard of this story, and that's assuming that he'll be tried in front of a jury, and he may not be. But
you know where your mind goes right away, and at least mine does, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners does. We want to call him Mr. and we want to, protect him in prison, and we want to. And I know your mind goes right away. Well, who protected his victims? Nobody protected his victims. Why?
His alleged victims, as we'll say.
And then we even have to say alleged, of course, because we have to be very careful not to do anything.
Well, due process, right?
Exactly, and that's fair. But it feels like, you've got to just tiptoe through this thing. I think all of us want this to go quickly now. We want it to be right, that's the right guy. We want it to be, convict him as quickly as possible so we can judge him. I mean, isn't that true?
I mean, because really, by all standards, supposed to be presumed innocent.
Right.
Innocent until, proven guilty, right? Innocent until proven guilty. We don't know for sure. We don't know. The police may have a really good idea, but we don't know that evidence that they have.
We have no idea.
All the pieces sound like, it sounds like it might all fit together. That's all fine and dandy. But we want an outlet to express our rage and our anger, and he's the guy that's going to do it because he is now the suspect.
Because we're looking at a picture of a 2-year-old girl in a Montreal Canadiens sweater smiling at daddy.
I hate to say this. If it was just Terry Blanchette that this guy is accused of murdering, would we be that upset? No. It would be another murder. It would be another killing in a small town.
Just another murder.
Just another murder in a small town that probably we wouldn't pay any attention to. It's the 2-year-old child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know a lot of people that are listening to the announcers right this minute are going to say, why are you spending so much time talking about the accused? Why are we not keeping the focus on the victims here? And I will acknowledge that, but I'll also point out that oftentimes crimes like these that grab the collective, that take Canadians and shake us by the shoulders and say, you better start paying attention to this. These are the moments, these are the tipping points where we have to start talking about bigger things. Like, which political party do you believe is tough on crime through this election season? To which political party do you align your own personal beliefs? And to which prime ministerial candidate do you believe you can trust with addressing crimes and situations like this, like Canadians believe they should?
But that conversation, of course, is all about punishment and not prevention, because there's nothing here that I can see that would have prevented this, because there's no other story here. At least
as far as
we
know.
Right.
And here's the other thing, and I said this to my husband after all of this. I'm watching on Facebook, I'm watching on Twitter, and phone calls. Everyone, of course, everyone is fired up, and it's, and I don't want to use this but I'm going to use this term because I don't know of a better one right now. But almost, what do you call it? Jumping on the bandwagon. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start waving this flag again. No, death to child killers, capital punishment, death penalty, all that sort of stuff. This is my flag that I'm going to wave. For a couple of days, and then it's out of the news wheel, it's out of the news cycle, and then we all forget about it again. I heard one guy call into your show saying, no, I'm going to go to every forum possible and ask the question and find out and pressure. And that's what needs to be done, I think. If you want change and if you want to do something, that's what needs to be done. Because you can sit here and wave your flag all you want. If you're not going to follow through on it, a week from now, a month from now, 2 months from now or a year from now, then you're just all talk.
Mm-hmm. That is sadly true. And as
and it
angry
happens
every time, and as angry as people were on your show, and as grieving as they were on your show, and they were on ours as well, there will come a time, and there did on our show, where somebody will text and say, "Isn't there anything else?
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
This is just sad. Can we move on to something happy?" And you think, my goodness, in the same day that this is all being unveiled to us, we've already started to see a couple of people say, "Yeah, let's move on."
But I wonder if some people find it just too heavy. They need something. I mean, you're a stand-up comedian. I mean, that the whole premise of that profession sometimes is based on either you laugh so you don't cry. Oftentimes, I mean, stand-up comics, as far as my cultural observations, were some of the first to allow people, this is the first one that comes to mind, to start healing after the attacks on September 11th. It was those first I mean, Gilbert Gottfried found himself in some trouble. So did some others. Also the Japanese tsunami. He's no stranger to controversy. But within reason, some stand-up comics allowed us the entry point to be vulnerable and talk about things. I just didn't want to be the one that if someone's on their drive into work, tuning into 630 CHED, hearing the news of the murder of Hailey Dunbar-Blanchette, this 2-year-old, to hear me talking about dairy supply management. Right. I don't want to be that idiot that appears to be totally out of touch with what everybody's hurting about. That's where I was coming from. We have just 1 minute left, but you talked about punishment versus prevention. What about rehabilitation? If Derek Saretsky is convicted under current Canadian law, he could face 50 years in prison. Now, he could be released at age 72. Do you believe somebody after 50 years of a prison education, and I don't say that in a positive sense, if he's convicted, being found guilty in the deaths of 2 people, which is not yet the case, could he be a productive, contributing member of society 50 years from now?
Wait a minute. Could he be or should he be? Could he be? Maybe. Should he be? No.
If he makes it out.
Thank you for listening to the announcers. Jalen Nye, Andrew Grose joining me. I am Ryan Jespersen, and this is 630 CHED.